Rob Tebbutt for ID Boxing. We've seen in the build-up to this, everyone talking about the weight. Chris Eubank Jr. coming down to 157, Conor Benn moving up to 157. If this fight goes ahead on the back of an adverse analytical finding for a doping test, what kind of message does that send for fighter safety?
Well, I think it depends on, one, the results of that test, which no one actually really knows about, the levels of that test, particularly the process of UKAD. Conor Benn's hearing has got to be done. We've had been this situation before with fighters that have had an analytical finding that actually have been found not guilty of any violation. Right now, there has been no doping violation by Conor Benn. There is no suspension of Conor Benn. And until that happens, we should reserve our rights in that respect and also decide whether the fight takes place on Saturday. All those findings have been seen by Team Eubank. They've taken their own independent medical advice, of which they're happy with to proceed with the bout. I would like the British Boxing Board of Control to be comfortable, but I would also like them to be responsive.
With regards to the B sample, he's not tested. He's not had any doping violations at the minute because the B sample hasn't been tested. Is that correct? Why is the B sample not been tested yet?
Because just a timing issue.
When was the test?
We're talking about a couple of weeks ago. So
how long does it take for a B sample to be put through?
It depends on, once you hear the reasons why that opening was required by a scientist, you will see why. I can't say too much on it at the moment, but ultimately that sample will be tested by a specialist, and all those conversations have been taking place. So the bigger issue here, Rob, is, in all honesty, is the technicality of VADA versus UKAD. British Boxing Board of Control do not acknowledge VADA testing. We had a very similar situation with Billy Joe Saunders, where he had an adverse finding on his VADA test. Massachusetts banned him. The British Boxing Board of Control said his UKAD test was clear. We do not acknowledge VADA. So they need to make a decision what they want to do. If they don't suspend him, which they haven't and can't, he is clear to fight. So there's a whole process that I can't give you the answers for right now, because that process has to, and you're talking about a young man's career, that he will want this process to be done absolutely to the T. And from there, we need to decide what the board are going to do, because there's been plenty of precedents in the past where this has happened, and he is not suspended. But again, I want them to be comfortable.
How did he get into Conor Benn's system?
It's a question for him and the hearing and the scientists. When you see the levels and you see the results from this test, as Team Eubank here, you might have a different opinion. But right now, you know, that's a process he's going to have to go through.
VADA is historically known as the gold standard of testing. I remember the Dillian Whyte situation where he failed a UKAD test but passed the VADA test. Okay, adverse analytical finding for a UKAD test, but then the VADA test, he was kind of cleared on the basis of that. He passed that. What changed here? Why is UKAD apparently the be-all and end-all, the UKAD test here?
You've never seen me criticise UKAD testing in terms of its quality.
UKAD followed the WADA code, correct?
Yeah, but at the end of the day, all his UKAD tests which have been around. By the way, the VADA result has to be analysed and go through that process. All I'm saying to you is that the UKAD testing that's taken part for this fight, of which there has been many, are negative. That is the agency that the British Boxing Board of Control rules apply by. Don't forget, Rob, Conor Benn, Eubank, Matchroom, we implemented VADA testing. We paid for VADA testing in addition to UKAD testing for this bout. They're a very good agency, and there'll be a process that's followed. And I'm not saying he's positive, he's negative, whatever, or he's guilty, he's not guilty. I'm saying there's a process that has to be followed, as we've seen with fighters before who people have said this and that, and they've been found to be not guilty. But I'm more specifically looking at the rules here to say Conor Benn is not suspended by the Board of Control. Therefore, he is clear to fight. If you're not happy right now with this fight, we need answers as to what is the process moving forward. And Conor will have his own fight on his hand, or out of the ring, with the other situation.
Final question from me. If the British Boxing Board of Control don't sanction this fight, will you take it to Luxembourg? Will you take it to Gibraltar? Is there any contingency plans?
No, I mean, look, there's many, many different options around what we could do.
List them?
Sorry?
What are the options?
Many. I mean, I've had them today. Injunctions, different commissions, all which would allow the fight to take place. The British Boxing Board of Control are our governing body. I want them to be happy and comfortable, but they also need to give us answers of the process moving forward. If you're not suspending Conor Benn, if there's no doping violation right now, if you're not going to suspend Conor Benn, what is the process for this fight happening? And that's what we need to know.
Okay, Eddie Hearn, thanks very much.
What's the cut-off point? When does this need to be sorted out by?
I mean, as soon as possible, really. But obviously, we have to deal with the process that's in front of us. You know, this is a process that, behind closed doors, both teams have been working on to make sure that everybody's comfortable with the positions in terms of findings, analytics, levels, all this kind of stuff. And experts who are a lot more capable than the British Boxing Board of Control have given that advice to Chris Eubank Jr. that the fight is safe to proceed with. However, we want our governing body to be happy with the situation, but we also need answers. They're choosing not to suspend Conor Benn. They're choosing not to apply any misconduct charge. They're just saying, we're not going to sanction this fight at the moment. So when will you? We should have an emergency hearing, for one, because we can't just leave it in thin air and say, okay, well, if we postpone the fight for 3 weeks, you don't acknowledge VADA, so therefore all of his UKAD testing for this fight is negative. So that's how you make your rulings, which is the same situation of when you didn't choose to suspend Billy Joe Saunders, for example. So it's very complicated, but ultimately we need to work at pace because both fighters have been going through this for a while now, whilst this has been happening behind the scenes, and we need to make sure they're comfortable as we do, ideally, the British Boxing Board of Control.
Yeah, I mean...
Give us a lot.
Yeah. Thanks, mate. Sorry. This is about the reputation of the sport, though, isn't it? That's probably why the board have stepped in and said this is rigged. You've got a guy who has failed a drug test and is banned by the local boxing board of control. Why should you persist in this fight? In the eyes of the public, should it be going ahead?
No, because you have to go down the ruling of the British Boxing Board of Control, which is they only acknowledge the testing agency. Don't forget, with VADA is there to report to the teams and the camps, not to the commission. We pay a lot of money for that. Conor Benn insisted on that testing as well. But ultimately, we need answers in terms of the suspension of Conor Benn. Don't forget, he's going to have to go through a process and a hearing, and we should reserve all rights till that process happens. But right now, he's not suspended, he's cleared to fight. We'd prefer a decision either way in that respect, because otherwise it's open-ended. They're not going to suspend Conor Benn because they do not acknowledge this testing agency. And all of the UKAD tests have come back negative.
When he failed the test for VADA at the end of September, when was the first UKAD test?
The UKAD test has been a number of them through this camp. And they've been testing him on the date of his last fight. Previously, before this camp even started, his last one was 4 weeks ago, something like that. Yeah, 4 weeks ago was his last UKAD test. And we've been chasing for that, and actually that's been confirmed, come back negative as well. So in this situation, it's always cloudy, but we just want to try and follow the rules of the governing body. And the rules state that he is not and cannot be suspended.
So final word then, so take your mind right now, standing here at the local workhouse, this fight is going ahead pending a legal battle?
No, this fight is going, in an ideal world, this fight is going ahead pending the comfort of the British Boxing Board of Control. Of course, we have both fighters that are ready to fight, both fighters that, a very unique situation where one fighter has been made aware of a situation like this, has done his own medical research in terms of levels, blood tests, everything, and he's comfortable to proceed. But there are many different options and ways for us to proceed with this bout. We'd like to do it in conjunction with the British Boxing Board of Control, or certainly get clarity in terms of the steps forward for this fight to take place.